Senator John McCain was first elected to the House of Representatives in 1982 and to the Senate in 1986. He's generally considered his party's leader on foreign policy and national security matters, and serves, of course, as the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. In this role, he's made U.S. policy toward Asia a primary issue of focus for the committee and for his own efforts. I should note that for more than 5 years, I called him boss, and in many ways still do. And so it is my personal privilege to turn the floor over to Senator John McCain.
Thank you, Richard. And you could have made it longer. I wouldn't have complained. Richard is one of many former staffers of mine that populate think tanks and government and other places around this town. And they say it's like Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never check out, right, Richard? And I want to thank CNAS for inviting me to speak today, and thank you, Richard, for your outstanding leadership. I see also you've invited another outstanding Arizonan today, Representative Matt Salmon, chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific. And I want to thank CNAS's strong commitment to its Asia-Pacific security program, which is a recognition that this region is and will be critical to U.S. economic and security interests. Today, by coincidence, our hearing in the Senate Armed Services Committee was the commander in Korea, General Scaparetti, and of course our commander in the Pacific, Admiral Locklear. Both of them had very interesting and in some ways disturbing comments to make, including the fact that the Koreans most likely now have the capability to launch a missile that could strike the United States of America. That should concern all of us, given the vagaries of the rotund ruler who resides in Pyongyang. So we are living in I look forward to your questions. We're living in a time of unprecedented turmoil, from Henry Kissinger to Zbigniew Brzezinski, from George Shultz to Madeleine Albright to Brent Scowcroft, and the list goes on and on. All, whether they served in Republican or Democrat administrations, have testified that they have not seen greater crises and challenges since the end of World War II. And of course, we know about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, ISIL. The list goes on and on. But I think it's important to keep the focus of America's long-term interest in the Asia-Pacific region, which Secretary Ash Carter has called, quote, the defining region for our nation's future. Put simply, if the 21st century is going to be another American century, America has to remain an Asia-Pacific power. On this, Republicans and Democrats agree. It's no secret we have plenty of differences on a number of issues, but when it comes to the Asia-Pacific, there's broad bipartisan agreement and a chance, I think, to rebuild foreign policy consensus. The first priority, I believe, is that Congress must pass trade promotion authority for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I know that sounds a little strange coming from the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, but it has to be our #1 priority if we are going to remain an influence. And I would argue that the future of America's economy is directly related to that as well. We must remember that our treaty allies, we have to talk a lot about the importance of relations with Asia, with Europe and the Middle East, but we have treaty allies in the Asia-Pacific that are counting on us: Australia, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Thailand. And we need to put in the time and effort to strengthen these alliances while reaching out and cultivating new partnerships with countries like Vietnam and, very importantly, Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim nation. Third, our military and edge in the Asia-Pacific is at risk. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper told the Armed Services Committee back in February that China's rapid military modernization is deliberately designed to counteract or thwart American military strengths. Faced with challenge of operating in denied environments, we have a lot of work ahead if we aim to sustain our traditional military advantages in the Asia-Pacific region. And that's why, for instance, I wrote a letter to Secretary Carter urging him to explore options for a new carrier-based unmanned aircraft capable of performing precision strike missions. I don't think there's any doubt that the Chinese behavior is aggressive, whether you call it confrontational or whether you, however, we get a little bit mixed up in words. But when any nation fills in 600 acres of land in a year and builds runways, and most likely is putting in other military capabilities in what is international waters, is clearly a threat to where the world's economy is going, has gone, and will remain for the foreseeable future. So we face enormous challenges. And as we, again, are diverted to the Middle East and the fighting around Tikrit and whether ISIS is going to retake Ramadi or not, I think we should keep our eye on the ball as to where the world's economy lies and where many of our challenges in the future lie, and that is much, much more insecure without robust American presence, both in soft and hard power. I'd be glad to talk about other aspects of our relationship, and I'd be glad to give you my 45-minute speech on the North Korean nuclear buildup, but I'll save that for another day. Thank you very much. By the way, I'm probably headed over during the next recess to Vietnam and to the Shangri-La province that's in Singapore, but it happens to be the 20th anniversary of the normalization of relations between the United States and Vietnam. One of the aspects of my career that I am extremely proud of that was done in a bipartisan fashion, and I think that the Vietnamese need a ways to go, to say the least. But the fact is that we have an excellent relationship, and one that I think has been very beneficial to both our nations, including to our veterans who served there and have better been able to come all the way home.
David Russell, please about the regulation. What should the United States be doing in response to that to discourage it?
Well, I think one of the things we need to do is actually not say we're going to pivot, and we said we're going to pivot. As far as I can tell, that means 2 littoral combat ships have been moved, that we need to truly pivot. Second of all, I think we need to strengthen obviously our alliances. ASEAN is a gathering of nations that are interested, I think, and were intended for non-military issues. There's got to be, I believe, greater cooperation and work together with the other ASEAN nations. One of the issues that continues to upset all of us is the lack of relationship between Japan and Korea and the Republic of Korea. I know that it goes back to World War II. I know that it goes back to feelings of humiliation and other aspects of the relationship that go back to World War II. But it grieves me that both nations can't put this behind them, because they can be our 2 most stalwart bulwarks against Chinese aggression in Asia, given their economies, their size, their military capabilities. that's one area that I continue to try to see progress on.
Senator Juan Carlos Benitez from Guam. You mentioned the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. One critique of our months of the Chamber is the territories of the Pacific are not part of the definition of the United States for the agreement, so we're excluded from the agreement. Anything you do or help understand for us why we cannot be part of this great agreement guarantee?
Frankly, I did not know that. I think it's disgraceful. I will do everything that I can. And by the way, we continue to give emphasis, particularly this year, on the relocation from Okinawa. I asked Senator Sullivan, who is the new senator from Alaska, who's a former Marine, was actually stationed in Okinawa over the last recess, to go out and see where we are and what else we need to do on this relocation from, as you know, in Okinawa. Things are very, very tense there, and we have to move our Marine presence away from the heavily populated areas, as you know. That directly affects Guam, and there will be certainly some repositioning of some of our assets and forces which will directly affect Guam. Thank you.
Senator Joe Bosco, formerly with the Defense Department. You mentioned twice the North Korean proliferation threat. You also talked about China's aggressiveness, its aggressive behavior. To what extent has Chinese support for enabling North Korea's nuclear missile program been part of the overall Chinese strategy to distract the United States and serve China's strategic interests in expressing fire?
First of all, this morning the word aggressive was used concerning China was used by our Pacific commander. So it's not one that I invented. I'm not sure that China has had that much to do with North Korean development, nuclear development. But there is no doubt in anybody's mind, and there should be no doubt in anybody's mind, that the very economic existence of Korea is dependent upon China. And if China wanted to change North Korean behavior, they could do it by just squeezing their economy to some degree. It wouldn't be that difficult. And when the new Chinese leader was here in Washington about a year ago, I asked him, I said, why do you continue to prop up North Korea? What is it in China's interest? What is a united Korea? How is a united Korea a threat to China? Might have been 50 years ago, 70 years ago, whatever it is, but to me, it makes no sense. After saying that, asking him that question, his answer was translated, Senator McCain is very well known in China for his strong views. Thank you very much for that, response. So I'm just not sure how much. I know that there is allegations and I think some evidence of North Korean-Iranian cooperation on the nuclear issue, but I have not heard it concerning the Chinese involvement. But have no doubt about the very existence of North Korea, certainly with this regime, is totally dictated to a large degree by China. Well, as you know, whether this administration wants to acknowledge, much less emphasize, we have a treaty with Taiwan where we guarantee their security. It's an old treaty, but as far as I know, it hasn't been repealed. And I believe that our relationship with Taiwan has to be maintained, and obviously there's a careful balancing with our relationship with China. But for those who would urge the reintegration of Taiwan into China, I would ask them to look at the Hong Kong example. There's certainly guarantees that were made concerning Hong Kong at the time of the handover of the British Hong Kong to China. Those have not, there's not even a semblance of what that commitment should have been. So we all know it's a very delicate balance, what kind of weapons that we sell to Taiwan and the whole relationship. But I believe we should honor our treaties and our solemn agreements, and that one is a solemn commitment on the part of the United States to guarantee that Taiwan is free and independent. Any more questions?
More questions?
Well, could I say again, I was very proud to have Richard Fontaine on my staff, particularly since he came on a work release programs, and it turned out that those are very successful. He's been out to Betty Ford's a couple of times since, but other than that, he's been doing well. I want to thank everybody here for thinking about Asia. I want to thank everybody here for being engaged in that issue. And I understand why the attention of the American people and mine is a lot deflected to where people are fighting and dying as we speak. But I also believe that when we look at the long-term interests of the United States of America and the world, it lies in the Asia-Pacific region. And I didn't mention Indonesia enough. I didn't mention India enough. I just want to say about India, if I could. The first time, and since any of us can remember, they have a strong leader with a strong parliamentary backing. I am confident that with the development of that relationship with Modi, that we can form a relationship which will be and could be a balancing factor in the region. With that, I thank you all very much. Thank you, Richard. See you. Thanks.